Okay, so what happened? I've told this story a couple times, but here's the reality of sort of time, history, business, and timing, and schedules, and partners, and all these things. But when we originally started the company, we were going to do a 5-part series, right? It was going to be part one, part two, and like that. That would equal the Oddworld quintology. But what happened was we were the first game was a nice hit for the publisher, but all the other developers slipped for that Christmas, or most of the developers. And I'm talking id slipped with Doom 2, Unreal, Epic slipped with Unreal, the guys in Texas slipped with Duke Nukem. All those titles were supposed to be Christmas, and they slipped, but we made it on time. And but that was really bad for the publisher company that those games slipped. So long story short, they were then looking at us to say, you're the only one we can rely on for next year. We need you to do part 2 for next year. And we're like, that was not, there was no way, right? Like the engine was terrible for Abe's Odyssey. I mean, it was really the most painful thing to work with, right? It was like brushing your teeth with a single hair of the brush. It was just really archaically painful. And so we were not intending to build the next game with that engine. We were not intending to build it in exactly the same format. We were planning on taking at least 2.5 years on it, at least, not have to deliver the next game in 9 months. But that's what we wound up sort of having to do. And I'm not saying they strong-armed us into it, but they own almost half the company, and you try to be good partners and you try to accommodate. And who knows where things would go if you didn't comply. And I'm not saying there was any threats or anything like that, so please don't read anything else into it. It was just a decision that we went along with. But in the course of that, it completely derailed what my intention of the story was, and that sort of derailed the epic 5-part series right out of the gate. Abe's Odyssey was complete. That was the summary of that story quite well. It was very sort of simple fable tale that would open up into more complicated storytelling, a deeper themes that would be happening, and we'd really start digging in deeper to the universe. But that's not what happened, because we had to get a game out in 9 months. In the course of that, it was so much pressure and had to happen so fast that we started to get a little more goofy with some of the content. Like if you look, it became more like jokes. The themes got a little less deep for the sake of expediency. So it was like, what can we get done? And then we're on the Exoddus. It's like, oh, what can we do with this engine? Because it's just god awful. We didn't have time to make a lot of new characters work. So it was like, well, what if we made the Mudokons, the blind Mudokons? You had to tell them to wait, or they'll walk into objects and die. It was like, well, we can do that in 9 months. We can get these little things to work. So it was really, Exoddus was really, at the end of the day, it was a better sort of playing succinct game. And as I've seen fans talk about it at times, they go, it was twice the game but half the heart, right? And I think that was kind of an accurate description. And the team had done a great job. Like, everyone did a great job, and it was a very difficult thing to achieve, but it got us off track from what that story was. And that was, for me, I had a very specific idea of what part 2 was that opens up 3, 4, and 5. And basically the slave living in the meat processing plant in the third world will eventually, figure out that he's not just got a good job, the retirement plan's a lie, they're going to chop up everyone. And he becomes the catalyst that begins the movement of the slaves freeing themselves in this continent of Mudos on Oddworld. And then the second title was around the brew, and how the brew was used to sort of pharmaceutically, through consumer products, keep people enslaved. And that was a mystery that we would unfold in that game. So while Abe's Exoddus had brew, and it was a well laid out game. It was people did a great job for the era. Things were pulling together on it, but it really derailed that story. And at the time, without getting too much baggage of the history there, that is something that kind of continued to happen to us in different ways. So then that publisher is now failing and going out of business, and they're getting acquired by people that we don't know and are in a different country, different culture, and they're not doing it very well either. And so this company is kind of, they're trying to figure out how to cut everyone's budgets. Complicated things is going on, real survival in the industry kind of moments. And out of that, we wind up going over, having problems with the PS2. And then we go over to Xbox. And when we went to Xbox, they were looking at us as a launch title for Munch. And that shaped the title as like, we see you as the competitor for Mario on our platform versus Nintendo. And it was like, okay, but that kind of, and I'm not saying we weren't in alignment with what we needed to do to survive, but again, it was skewing the title a little young and a little youthful versus I wanted it to get more intense and keep sort of a youthful charm, but get into really deep, dark, complicated themes, and just kind of sort of have that irony of sort of, black comedy and just these really dark, relevant themes about, the dark side of globalism. And to bring the short of it, then with Stranger, I just felt let's just break out of the quintology because I don't like where it's going, and I'm just doing a repair job rather than like fulfilling a vision that had a really great arc across the big epic 5-part series. So when we had the success of New and Tasty, which quite honestly was all we could really afford to build at the day, we were like, well, we've been having success republishing old titles, converting them onto other platforms, bringing Munch to PS3, things like that. And it was like, well, or Stranger to PS3, and Munch, I believe, went to PS3 as well. But so we were coming out of all that. We redid Abe's Odyssey as New and Tasty, and then that really had more success than we were actually expecting. And it was a difficult game to get done, but we got that done. And then from there, we kept on asking the audience, like, what would you like to see next? And they kept saying, Exoddus, do the same thing to Exoddus. And that was our existing fan base. And we were like, well, damn, Exoddus was not the game I really wanted to build. So if we're going to revisit Exoddus, then let's go back to the original vision of what that part 2 was supposed to be narratively. And then we're back on that track of sort of the darkening quintology that gets really intense. And it doesn't, just become sort of youthful comedy with some dark tones, but it actually gets intense and more epic in all ways of proportion. And so Benny and I are looking at this, and we're deciding, wow, it's a big task to bite off a whole new game, all the new designs,
Absolutely.
Not to underestimate the effort involved. We're on our own. We'd be paying for itself. Do we think we can do it? And we decided to go for it. And, Sherry was supportive and wanted to do it. And so we went for it. And then in going for it, that's where it's it really has very little semblance at all to anything Exoddus, except certain themes and certain ideas and certain places and certain characters reemerge, but they're more closer to what the original vision was. And that's not anything close to what the original Abe's Exoddus that released to the public was. So it's really a brand new game, and it's a revisioning for us. And if we're successful at that, then we're re-kicking off the quintology, and hopefully the audience says, please show us part 3.